Hi, in this video we are going to be rounding to the nearest tens and rounding to the nearest hundreds using 3 different strategies. So if you are in my class, you're watching this video and we're going to do some review when I see you at school, and I might send you home with some of these pages to practice. So when we are rounding, we're always going to ask the same questions. So we'll get a number, it tells us to round it to a certain place. And then these are the questions. We'll ask 4, and then we'll have our answer once we've done those 4. So what place are you rounding to? Tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. What are the benchmarks? So that's what's below it and what's above it. What's the halfway point between your benchmarks? Are you going to round up or down? And then once you do all these, you'll have your answer. Let's look at our benchmarks. So if you're rounding to the nearest 10, then you're going to use your benchmark tens, and that's basically just us skip counting by tens. So we've got 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, or 100, and you'll be rounding to one of these. And you want to keep in mind the halfway point, because halfway between 0 and 10 is 5. Halfway between 10 and 20 is 15. Halfway between 20 and 30 is 25. Halfway between 30 and 40 is 35, etc. So the halfway point always has a 5 in it. Now, if you're rounding to the nearest 100, you're going to use your benchmark hundreds. And those are just counting by hundreds. So 0, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000. Yes, you can round up to 1,000. The halfway points still have a 5, but in this case, the halfway points are your 50s. So halfway between 0 and 100 is 50. Halfway between 100 and 200 is 150. Halfway between 200 and 300 is 250, and so on. So you're going to use these to find your benchmark. And then you use the halfway point to figure out if you're going to round up or down. If you're halfway between or more, you're going to round up. But if you're less than halfway, you'll round down. We have 3 strategies that we're going to use. And it's really important that you try all 3. And then, once you've done it a bunch, you'll know which strategy is the best for you, but it's good to try them all so that you can really understand what you're doing. One strategy is to plot it on a number line. Another strategy is to picture it with base 10 blocks. And then the last strategy is to look at the number and use place value. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The question says, what is 632 rounded to the nearest 10? So, what place are we rounding to? Well, thankfully, it almost always tells us. It says right here, 10. So we're rounding to the nearest tens. I'm using a marker so you can see it, but I highly suggest you use a pencil. And let's find that 10 in this number so that we know what digit we're really talking about here. This is the hundreds, that's the tens, and that's the ones. So we're talking about that 3. That's the one that we're going to round. That also means that whatever is after it will end up being a 0 no matter what. And that what's before it, you don't really need to worry about. We'll keep the 6, but we're not really doing anything with it. All right, the next question is, what are the benchmarks? In other words, the number 632 is between what 2 tens? And why are we saying tens? Well, we're saying tens because it's asked us to round to the nearest 10. So let's look at our benchmark tens. And we have 630. Okay. Oh, 632, my apologies. Don't worry about that 6, just think about that 32. Well, it's more than 30, right? So it's not any of these. Is it more than 40? 32? It is not. So 632, what two tens does it fall between? It falls between the 30 and it falls between the 40. Those are our two benchmarks. So here I'll write the number 632 is between what two tens? It's between the 30 and the 40. And that's what we're deciding between. So it's either going to end up being 630 if we round down, or 640 if we round up. Those are your two possible answers. Okay. So now we need to find the halfway point. What is the halfway point between 30 and 40? Let's start with a strategy then and use our number line. That's my favorite strategy. So once you know your benchmarks, that's what you put on your number line. You don't have to put all the tens in the world on your number line. We know that our lower benchmark is 30, so I'm going to draw a line here and put 30. And we know our upper benchmark is 40. And then let's go ahead and add that 6 back in. It's not going to bother us, but we're really talking about 630 versus 640. Cool. Now we need to find the halfway point. So I'm going to grab another color, and you can use your pencil, and just make a mark between these two. Well, halfway between 630 and 640, you're going to use your 5s there. So halfway between would be 635, because all your halfways are 5s. 5, 15, 25, 35, 45, 55, etc. That's our halfway point. Now, I'm going to mark the 1s on here. So that's 630, 631, 632, 633, 634, 635, 636, 637, 638, 639, 640. Now I want you to plot it. Our number is 632, so we're looking at this 2 here to help us. And it is right here. Now, we already identified that the halfway point is 635, right? Let me go ahead and write that in there. So now we're just going to say, are you going to round up or down? Well, if you get to halfway or more, then you would round up. But if you're less than halfway, you're going to round down. Take a look at this number. Has it passed the halfway point? Not even close. 632 is less than the halfway point. So we're going to round down, and we're going to round right to that 630. So that's our answer, 630. So we rounded down because it was less than halfway, and our answer is 630. Notice that the tens, we rounded to the tens, so it was always that 3. It was either going to change to a 4 if we rounded up, or stay at a 3. We rounded down. But everything after that digit turns into a 0. But we used that 2 to help us decide if we were rounding up or down. Okay, now we're going to do the same problem with base 10 blocks. So 632, 600s, 3 10s, and then 2 1s. Same process. What place are we rounding to? We're rounding to our 10s. So here are our 3 10s. And the question is, are we going to stay at 3 10s, 30, or do we have enough of these guys that we almost have enough for another 10? Could add one more in there to get us up to 40. We're rounding to the nearest 10s, but really what decides it are the 1s. So whatever digit you're rounding to, look at the one after it, and that's really going to help us decide. If you have just a few 1s, not very many, well, you're probably going to end up going down. But if you have a ton of 1s, it's almost another 10, then you would round up. And the way we decide that is by looking at that halfway point. So halfway between 30 and 40, let's take a look at it. Here's our 30. We want to get up to 40. Well, halfway looks like this. What is half of a 10 block or a 10 rod? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 35. So here on our number line, when we said halfway between 630 and 640 was 635. Here's our 6. We don't really need them, but we want to remember they're there. Here's our 630. This is our halfway point, 635. And the question is, do we have enough ones to round up and turn it into 640? Or do we have so few ones that we might as well just get rid of them and round down to 630? That would be the halfway point. How many ones do we actually have in this number? 2. 632. This is what the number actually looks like. Wow, that is not a lot of ones, is it? It's less than the halfway point because the halfway point would be this 5, and it's less than that. So we are going to round down, and this number, when it was 632, round it down. There's your answer, 630. Here's our final strategy. It is a little faster, but you want to make sure you really understand these before you do the last one so that you understand the concept of rounding. Here's our last strategy. Take a look at the number, 632. What number are you rounding to? The tens. Underline the tens. This number will either stay a 3 or it will round up to a 4. That's it. Those are the only options. So it will either stay a 3 if you're rounding down, or it will turn into a 4 if you're rounding up. In other words, it's going to end up being 30 or 40, right? The way to figure it out is to look at the next digit to the right. That's always the kicker that helps you decide. Those are those 2 blocks that help you decide to go up or down. Circle the next digit over. These are the ones. And here's our rule. 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. Because 5 is that halfway point. 2, is that more than 5? Exactly 5 or less? Well, it's 4 or less, right? So we're going to let it rest, which means the 2 rounds down to a 0. The 3 stays the same. And the 6 stays the same. And that's the last strategy. Okay, let's do one more. We'll do it a little bit quicker. And we're going to do it with our hundreds. So we'll round the same number to the hundreds place this time. All right. What is 632 rounded to the nearest hundred? I'm going to go a little faster because it's the same general idea. Okay, so question 1, what place are you rounding to? Underline it. Really take the time to underline it and see that you really know what it's asking of you so it doesn't trick you. We are rounding to the hundreds. What are the benchmarks? In other words, the number 632 is between what 2 hundreds? So take a look up here. We're going to use these. And we're going to find that 600 here. There it is. It's between 600 and 700. Because 632 is more than 600, but less than 700. Ignore all of that. Okay, let's use our number line. So our 2 benchmarks are 600 and 700. All right, so our lower benchmark is 600. Super easy because it's always the digit that's already there. Our upper benchmark is 700. So that's what we're deciding. Are we either going to round down to 600 or round up to 700? Those are our 2 possible answers. That's it. Next, we need to say, what is the halfway point between 600 and 700? Let's draw a line in between. What number goes there? Let's count by tens. What is halfway between 600 and 700? 610, 620, 630. etc. Let's look at it on here too. Remember, your halfway point always has a 5 in it. So halfway between 600 and 700 is 650. Okay? So this is our halfway point, 650. Now, are we going to round up or down? And the question is our number halfway or more? So is it past here, or is it less? To do that, we're going to look at the tens. So we're going to look at the next one over. And then let's put it on the number line. So 610, 620, 630, 640, 650, 660, 670, 680, 690. So our number is 632. So 610, 620, 630. So it's about right here. It's just right past 630. Well, we're using these tens to really guide us. All right, so is it more than halfway, or is it halfway? If so, we would round up. In this case, it's less, so we're going to round down, and the answer is 600. Easy. With the base 10 blocks, it's the same kind of idea. We're going to look at these. We've got 600s right here. And the question is, do we have enough tens? Do we have enough tens that we're almost at 100 and can just round up and throw another 100 in there and make it 700? Or do we just have a couple tens and we're going to take them away and leave it at 600? Well, what's the halfway point? Let's look at 100. To fill up half a 100 block, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You would need 5 of them. So if you have 5 or more, you can go ahead and round up and put another 100 in there and make it a round 700. But if you have less than 5, that's not enough. You're not even halfway full. So you need to take them away and go down to 600. In our case, we only have 3 tens. That is not halfway, so we need to get rid of them. And our answer is 600. Notice that I'm not using the 2's. I'm just using the digit I'm rounding to and the one after it. The 6's and the 10's. I do not have enough 10's to get us up to 700, so we're going to exit out, and our answer is 600. Last strategy. What are you rounding to? 600, or hundreds place. Underline the place you're rounding to. This 6 is either going to stay the same if you're rounding down, or it's going to turn into a 7 if you're rounding up. Circle the digit to the right. This is the decider. This guy doesn't matter right now. If this number is 5 or more, let it soar, and then this guy rounds up. If this number is 4 or less, let it rest, because that halfway point would need to be 50. Well, 3 is less than 5, so we're rounding down. These turn into zeros no matter what, but you use this to help decide if you would change this number, this digit or not. So since 3 is less than 5, we're going to round down, which means the 6 stays the same. And then these always turn into zeros. And that's how you get your answer.